The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. I want to welcome you all to this exciting webinar. You're seeing on your screen the announcement that we had sent out, which says this webinar is about technology. Technology is accelerating. How can educators prepare engineers for the future of the work? Our distinguished speaker is Dr. Michael Force, Executive Leader of Corporate Division Development at Boeing's Leadership, Learning, and Organizational Abilities Capability. Not going to spend much time on the details, but you have this picture and some information that was sent out to you earlier. And he's also an adjunct professor at Stanford University, so he's not new to academia. So thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Without much wasting and spending more time, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think you can see his screen picture actually, and making you the presenter as well. So you can click show my screen and say hello to everybody, and then turn off your screen, turn off your video.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for having me here. I'm really here just as a resource to lay out a few different ways we can think about educating people for the future. As Hans Hoyer and I first started thinking about this webinar, we talked about some places where I've been involved and thought it might be good to just come in and do a webinar and lay out some of the current thinking and initiatives around how we're driving these new technologies and skills around them for the future at various levels. And so we'll get into that. But I just wanted to first say welcome and thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be with you today. And again, I'm here as a resource. So just want to be able to convey what I've experienced, what I'm seeing, and then open it up to some questions and comments and really see how it can benefit you and how we might be able to go forward together. So with that, I'll get into the presentation and we'll have some questions at the end and also a poll that Krishna helped put together. I'm going to turn off my camera and go to the presentation now. Okay, so it's all about the future of work. And I'm just going to move us forward through some slides. The agenda here is pretty simple. I'll just real quick touch base on the fourth industrial revolution. I think we're all familiar with that, but just wanted to re-ground everyone on thinking around that and just my perspective on it. And then get into several mini case studies, and it's really about advancing the future of work at several levels. So we'll talk about the company level. I'll use Boeing as an example there. Country level, the US and what we're looking to do at the US level, the global level, and that's really through the World Economic Forum. And then back to a regional level, more of a developing country initiative to really try to keep those from who might be left behind from being left behind, ending with implications for engineering education. So we'll make it a quick tour over the next 20 minutes or so and then have questions and discussion. So just real quickly on my background, it was in my bio, but really people's background I think are interesting because of the perspective that it has given them over years. And so mine is probably more about high performing organizations and how technology can play into that. I finished my PhD, started at Intel. I ran Intel University, was there for about 12 years. Back in the glory days of Andy Grove, I thought he was a great leader and technologist. Then shifted to Microsoft and was more on the business strategy side there. Worked on business strategy in Windows, and then also did a startup within Microsoft where we hired 350 digital advisors who would go out and help Microsoft customers digitally transform their companies. So that's where I really got steeped more in the technology, more the business side, and more as a P&L leader. And then Boeing for the last 2 years, coming over to help digitally transform Boeing and focus on skills there. Just some of the other background, was curious about high-performing organizations. So I was a Baldrige judge and on the board there. If you're familiar with that, they have great criteria about what makes a high-performing organization. Have been certified as a management consultant, and then represent Boeing on the Aerospace Committee at the World Economic Forum. Volunteer at the UN, I've done that for 22 years, focused on first the training of ambassadors at the UN headquarters in New York, but more so after 9/11 on really programs for post-conflict countries, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then adjunct professor teaching at the University of Washington, Stanford, and Columbia, more on innovation, entrepreneurship, future of work. ReWork America is something we'll talk about. It's a task force to help keep the US upskilled. And then, of course, Global Engineering Dean's Council and our team today. So just stepping back from this, I think it's more a history of, hey, how does technology enable the future? How do we help people to learn that? And how do we create high-performing organizations as a result of it all? So just a little bit on the fourth industrial revolution. You know, when I was at Microsoft, the holy grail was putting the OS, the operating system, in the cloud. And a lot of people didn't think it could be done for a lot of years. I was there 14 years, and finally, with Azure and with AWS at Amazon, you can see that things moved into the cloud. And at first I thought, oh, well, you know, Windows will be in the cloud and Office, and won't that be neat, and Xbox, those kinds of things. But that's nothing. Those are just barely table stakes. What really can help it happen then in the cloud are enterprise applications. And when Steve Ballmer was very focused as CEO at Microsoft on competing with Apple in the consumer phone market, and there was a shift to Satya as the new CEO, Satya Nadella, and moving back to the roots of Microsoft, which is really enterprise applications. That's when things really started taking off for Microsoft, and they started doing really well again. And of course, you have Amazon and Google and others in this space, but the idea is that you can put enterprise applications in the cloud that make computing way faster and start to accelerate the use of technology. So much so that AI and artificial intelligence is evolving every 3 months. That will impact people's roles in the way people work in the future. And so I think everyone's familiar with this fourth industrial revolution. As you see, it started with the industrial revolution, mechanical. I think of smokestacks and Charles Dickens and, you know, the UK and mechanical industrial revolution. And then the second being more electrical. So the advent of electricity and assembly lines and Henry Ford and mass production. And then a lot of people still think we're in the third industrial revolution, which is more about IT and some personal computing and IT organizations having servers in their basement. Well, that's no longer true. We've evolved way beyond that, but most people don't know it. All of you do, but the general population. This fourth industrial revolution is the digital in the cloud part with AI, big data, machine learning, and now the advent of quantum computing, which will accelerate and speed up computing beyond what we've known today by far. And so all that has implications on enterprise applications that affect people in work and in jobs. So there has to be some method of keeping people fresh and updated that's way faster than what we do today. What we do today is just too slow, given the technology changes that are happening. This is a view of Boeing in our competitive landscape. So moving into a company level case study, just a couple slides here, the way we've been thinking about it. You know, there's some big, bold business goals. You've probably seen the aerospace difficulties and challenges of the recent few weeks with, from Boeing's perspective with the MAX and then the coronavirus on top of it. But even as we come out of that and look ahead, you have these bold business goals. You have a talent crunch, people going after data scientists for software engineers, people who can perform these new skills. But suddenly now you're basically a tech company competing with Google and Amazon and Microsoft. And so it's no longer a competition with Airbus or Lockheed. You have new players involved. And if you look off to the right, SpaceX, Blue Origin coming in. But also in the technology side, you have Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, Cisco, and others, Intel. It's an $8 trillion market going forward as we come out of this tough crisis. And so a lot of players are involved. That makes it very difficult from a talent perspective. Yet we need people with talent, and we need to keep upskilling them on the new competition. So that creates a real difficult situation from a technology and education perspective. So the way we think about it, and I'll just give you a quick overview of some thoughts around it, is we think about vertical levels of roles. And in the past, we've done a lot with more of a generic open enrollment curriculum where people are self-serving. But the problem is people will randomly take open enrollment courses, and we're not quite sure if they're really getting the skills that they need. My team have 3,300 courses that we manage, and the question becomes, are they the right courses? Is it the right strategy to have that many courses that we think people are getting what they need? And so how do we do it in a more strategic, holistic manner? If there's a request for a new course, we don't want to just keep adding courses thinking that that's going to meet the need of the business. And so the other way we think about it is programs. And so programs happen, maybe it's a week long or a day long or 2 days long, but those become point in time learning. And so it's a kind of a one-off program. People may take them, given the number of people we have, about 160,000, maybe once every 2-3 years. It's just too slow in a fourth industrial revolution world. It's not cyclical, it's not data driven, and maybe not enough tied to a business need. And then the question mark on here is also saying, do even the leaders or managers know what people are taking and supporting it? So these kind of one-off programs are maybe not the best approach, and we think open enrollment maybe doesn't quite do enough strategically to distill down what people need in their role moving forward. So the way we're thinking about it a little bit differently is, what are the major roles? What's core and common that those roles need? And a lot of it is around the foundation of these fourth industrial revolution skills. And then you can always do deeper job-specific add-ons. So if you're a software engineer, there could be a real core and common way of performing the software engineer role. We haven't had that so much now because we have commercial and we have defense and space and we have services, and they've all been teaching software engineers in their own way. So we need to look at this core and common and then think about more specific add-ons rather than starting with the specific add-ons and going really deep on a role and trying to provide training to everyone in every role across the company without thinking at the higher level. And then what that does is it helps tie the learning more to business objectives if we're thinking critical roles, critical skills tied to the business. And it's more about getting the right people with the right skills at the right time. So it's more about workforce capacity planning that enables a business strategy. And then a way to do ongoing upskilling and development that's data driven. And we really want to think about everyone in the population and be holistic and cover a complete life cycle. So everything from creating a role specification through to sourcing and hiring, onboarding, which core programs people need to take. Assessment and credentialing becomes critical because it's a fast flywheel to really assess and reassess people and do more surgical upskilling on critical skills for a role. And then we get our technical fellows and our Boeing designated experts to support on the job application of the skills and knowledge management. So it's also a thrust to really make sure that we get the right experts helping people with knowledge management on the job. And then, yes, we still want to balance this with elective role and career development. So it helps get us what Boeing needs based on a strategy, but also what an individual needs to develop in their role and their career and provide recommendations in that space for them to grow. So this is how we think about it just from a corporate case study perspective. A lot of companies are moving in this type of direction as we look and benchmark across companies. There are people who feel in their company they have too many roles, too many courses, and they're not sure they're really getting the traction they need. And then they're feeling a lot of the pressure of the fourth industrial revolution technologies because they can't keep up with courses to teach AI as it changes, or machine learning or quantum, and figure out how to feed it into the various roles. So into their open enrollment curriculum. Novartis, for example, has 400,000 courses. And they were saying, where does the madness end? It can't be that we just keep adding more open enrollment courses. So that's just a quick little case study, a mini case study on how corporate universities are struggling with this. If we move to the country level, one of the other places I've been involved is an initiative called ReWork America. It's by the Markle Foundation. And they're really about upskilling the US and trying to keep the US from falling behind on the fourth industrial revolution skills. And you could say other countries may be moving ahead of the US. You know, you have more technical graduates in China than all undergraduates who graduate in the US in a given year. India is coming on strong, Europe, Scandinavia. So how do we keep up and upskill the US in these fourth industrial revolution skills? There's a good report, which I can send around, or you can also get online, called Digital Blind Spot by the Markle Foundation, and it's part of this ReWork America network. And you can see it's a consortium of companies at the bottom in the lower left. So Boeing's part of it, Microsoft's part of it, as well as others. What this report talks about is, how do we go about continuously upskilling? How can companies continuously upskill, and what are the policies that a US government needs around this kind of work? Some of the quick data is that they really notice that the work is shifting, so that the skills that are needed focused on digital literacy continue to change. In the last 10 years, you can see they went from 26% to 34% of Americans who need to have those higher digital skills, and they're decreasing the skills at the lower end on some basic skills, and I'll show you more about that here in a moment. The way ReWork America thinks about it is, you've got to have the culture, the mindsets, the foundational skills, and then yes, at the top of this pyramid off to the left, digital information literacy. But we've been focused more in ReWork America is on these employability digital skills, and those skills look like this. For example, this is a snapshot of some of them. It's more about basic problem solving using technology, being able to interact with the technology, the tools around the technology, data security and safety and ethics, and then some more additional skills here at the bottom around occupation-specific analytics and data manipulation. And so this consortium is really worried that the future workforce doesn't have these foundational skills, and they're not being taught enough in K through 12 or in universities. And so the recommendations out of this report are really about, within an organization, particularly a company, so the consortia companies, agreeing on a definition of digital literacy, identifying target roles for upskilling, kind of like what we're doing at Boeing, then going deeper on occupation-specific skills, having an implementation partner, so a university that's really strong. We've done some work with MIT and Purdue and Georgia Tech and others in the engineering space, Cornell for HR, other universities tied to what we need for our skills, but also possibly a third-party organization. When I was at Microsoft and now at Boeing, we've done a lot with Pluralsight. Pluralsight's a third-party organization that really stays up to date on fourth industrial revolution skills. So thinking through who would be a good implementation partner, because we can't develop everything ourselves and reinvent the wheel constantly. And then monitor results, iterate, and expand. So this is what ReWork America and their latest report are suggesting and recommending. And these companies on the list to the left continue to grow, joining this consortium to figure out how best to deal with the fourth industrial revolution. So that's the country level case study. So we've covered the corporate case study, the country level. Now let's look at the global level. And this is some involvement we've had with the World Economic Forum. And they go after accelerators. So if you think ReWork America is really about some best practice sharing and policy work, the latest thinking in the World Economic Forum is accelerators. And I'll say what I mean by that. Their latest report, January 2020, if you haven't seen it, and I really think this organization is a really great resource for data on fourth industrial revolution, but it's called Preparing for the Future of Work, the project overview. And they're very clear about which jobs they think are emerging, the top 10, 133 million new jobs emerging and roles in this top 10 list. Of course, no surprise at the top, data analysts and scientists, AI, machine learning, and you can see from there, software. The top 10 declining, which they think are 75 million jobs, are more the things that will get automated first. Data entry, accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, you see the list, assembly, factory workers that might be able to be have technology enable the work rather than having so many workers. So the good news there is there's an emerging set of jobs that outweighs those that are declining. The issue we have, of course, all of us collectively on this webinar, is the skill gap. So just a little bit about the World Economic Forum. They see themselves as this catalyst for the reskilling revolution. And what I really think is interesting is, so they're trying to spark the ideas, spark the framework, and their goal is 1 billion individuals impacted by strategic upskilling in these fourth industrial revolution skills by 2030. So that's a pretty bold vision that they have. The way they want to do it, and I'm a rep from Boeing working on this, is through accelerators. So industry accelerators. This means by industry, so aerospace, financial sector, retail, travel. Pull these industry accelerators together and be able to really see how we can get synergy within those sectors, within a sector and across sectors. So for example, in the aerospace industry where I sit, we're taking on as our first priority data analytics. And then we want to move to AI because AI is evolving so much. We want to see where it's headed. But data analytics is really our first skill that we're going after. And so we sit with Airbus and Lockheed and Gulfstream, and we say, how can we get the skills together collectively? How can we have co-opetition, if you will? So we're cooperating. We still compete on our products and services in the marketplace, but how do we cooperate where there's a common need? And we think that finding a way to develop our people in a common way on data analytics is something we all want to do to save money, but also because we can't keep up with it all ourselves. So that's an example of industry accelerator. Country accelerator is within a country talking about the policy and infrastructure that are needed. And you can see it's across public, private, and even nonprofit sectors to say, how can a country accelerate these fourth industrial revolution skills, often involving departments of education, labor, those kinds of players, along with the private sector individuals, and universities, of course, play a big role here. Universities play a big role across all these accelerators, by the way, in my mind. And then this global network, how do we get people connected globally, regardless of country or industry, and figure out the best practices so that we really see how we get to leverage a network across the world. So these are bold ambitions, but the World Economic Forum pulls together world leaders, as you know, in Davos every winter. And the leaders have been accepting and ratifying proposals out of the World Economic Forum subcommittees around this work each year. I've been involved for the last 2 years, and they've ratified and adopted our proposals the last 2 years. So that's at least at the global level case study of how the thinking is happening around this. And of course, all this we're going to get to a point where we can talk about engineering deans and universities and the implications there. So I'm sure you're thinking about that already. I just want to click back to the regional level for a moment, because it's not just any regional level, it's a developing nation regional level. And this ties together some of the work I've done with the United Nations as a volunteer for a number of years. We had a program where we were developing Afghan government officials for about 15 years, and that program has ended. And it was really a baseline program around leadership strategy and program management, and it included some of the new technologies. Where we're headed now is we have a program that we're calling New Frontier Technologies, and it's really looking at how we can help a country like Afghanistan or Iraq or some of the post-conflict African nations think about developing their people on these technologies so that they don't fall further behind. And so there's a program that we've launched just this winter, and it's going now with Sweden. So you can see CETA down at the bottom, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, and the UN. And what it's talking about is it's really frontier technologies as a pilot with women engineers in Afghanistan and Iraq. And what we're doing with them is teaching them AI, so artificial intelligence, and entrepreneurship skills. And so you can see there's a whole proposal around this that I'm glad to send. But the idea is that we don't want them falling behind on these technologies, and we want to particularly focus on women engineers. It's very difficult for a woman to get a degree in engineering in a lot of the countries, and so they're also very prized for development. Investment in women has been shown to really help developing nations in a large way. So it won't be exclusively for women going forward, but we're starting to really focus on women engineers and entrepreneurs. And so the way this is playing out is we're looking to see what kind of impact it can have, particularly on UN Sustainable Development Goals. You're probably familiar with those, but this is a snapshot of some of the data around those development goals from the UN, the 13 of them in Afghanistan. As you can see, even though there's been progress made, there's still high unemployment, there's still a low education labor rate, low literacy rate. So we still have work to do on these UN Sustainable Development Goals for Afghanistan. And this program is just a small part of trying to have some influence. The way the program is working is over a period of 3 months, we're teaching the ladies entrepreneurship skills by having them take online modules through Stanford. Stanford's been kind enough to offer these for free. They're part of their online program around entrepreneurship, and it's a certification program. And then we've coupled that with some Japanese professors who are experts in artificial intelligence, who have signed up to personally mentor and coach these engineers, these women engineers from Afghanistan and Iraq. And so you can see going forward, we'd like to expand the program and also look to say, hey, can we bring them together and really develop their business plans? This is something that I've done in teaching at Stanford for years, which is help people really get down into a business plan, and it's pretty intense and really comprehensive in helping them think through how they might create a startup in Afghanistan or Iraq on AI with their engineering skills that they've gained and entrepreneurship skills. So grand experiment here, it's more at the developing nation regional level, particularly for post-conflict countries focused on women. And this is really an initiative. If you had the corporate case study and then you looked at the country case study like the US and the Markle Foundation, ReWork America, the global with World Economic Forum, we felt like we still needed to fill in gaps for post-conflict countries because there's just not enough reaching them, and it's all about not leaving anyone left behind. So final slide here is really about implications for engineering education, and I brainstormed a list based on my experience. I'm not trying to say this is comprehensive or even the perfect list or the right list, but it's just some thoughts to summarize this whole effort as we think about universities and engineering education and deans and how we might move forward and continuously improve engineering education. First, I just had this category on, okay, given the fourth industrial revolution, how do we teach new technology skills, but also the human skills that go with it? There's a different set of human skills that need to go with this technology because it's more about data insights and business acumen and how you work with a business, within a business as an engineering expert. So you have your technical ability that needs to evolve, but also the human skill piece needs to evolve to go with it as the technology changes. And so you can see here business acumen and knowing where the industry's headed. We see a need to teach engineers better how their piece fits in the larger picture, understanding the economics and the product they're building, and some more end-to-end design process and practices. Also how they're accountable across this life cycle. So how are they adding value and how do they keep getting feedback loops to understand what they've contributed is impacting value across the life cycle of a product. Safety and first-time quality, big deal. I think in any sector, as you know, at Boeing, that's a huge thing right now, but that's going to become more and more important as this technical fourth industrial revolution emerges and continues to evolve. And with that, you'll see ethics also playing in. And then, of course, these technical skills and how they're impacting engineering. We have a whole initiative around model-based engineering, for example, and how do these technical skills keep feeding in to change model-based engineering throughout the life cycle of a product. Second category is about how degree programs are taught. When we went to the GEDC event in Romania last year, it was really a set of students that came forward that were extremely vocal from Romania and Poland and the surrounding area that said, enough lecture, that's not how the world works. We need projects, we need experiential case studies, we need to learn things practically, realistically, end to end. And they were super vocal with the deans who were there. And we're looking, of course, within a company to have our learning programs be much more experiential and focused end to end and thinking about business acumen and providing that context for anything we're teaching. And so the thought here is, how do degree programs evolve to even do more of that? And I know a lot of that happens already, but there are still some traditional lecture-based programs and courses out there. Third category, immersing professors and students in corporations so they really get the sense of that real world along the way in their journey and getting their degree. So that could be helping companies do research. It could be short-term gig projects. So we're looking to hire back part-time people, so interns, who maybe have come for a summer to Boeing and go back to school, but we want to retain and keep hiring them part-time so they can work part-time while they're doing their program. Definitely internships in general. And then for grad students coming in and really working on a project, their thesis or dissertation, and being able to do that within the company. For professors, I think it's an education for them as well to come in and do some shadowing and some sabbatical projects as examples there. And so this is more a category about immersing the professors and students. And then also, just because we have such needs as companies, helping to co-create innovative new programs. We can't send everyone back to a 4-year degree to keep them upskilled. And so what do? We need shorter virtual certification programs. We need short residence programs, micro degrees. The world's moving more and more towards stackable credentials. We talk about this all the time at the World Economic Forum, that stackable credentials are becoming really important over time, and the more they can gain that in the university and after the university over time through continuous learning, really important. The global partnerships for global reach, everyone's trying to do this on their own, and we just need to pull together more holistically because we can be way more powerful. It's too expensive to try to keep up with this new technology one by one, company by company, university by university. The consulting and content that universities can provide is just golden in my mind, and I'm a huge supporter of universities and education systems in general, and how everyone from education societies and universities can provide corporate leadership and individual contributor programs on a consulting basis is super valuable for us. And then the consortia. So how do universities and education societies get involved in these efforts? The World Economic Forum, ReWork America, the work of the UN. And definitely, you know, I think we need to keep thinking this can't be only a first world problem. It's got to be more. We can't just have the wealthy countries or developed nations get better at this new technology and use it better without thinking about developing nations and bringing them along, or the gaps will just continue to increase. So we should be thinking along the way in parallel about how not to leave developing nations and post-conflict nations behind. So that's a quick tour through some mini case studies at different levels and some summary implications for engineering education that I've been thinking about. I think now we'll open it up to questions, comments. Christian has a poll that just one question.
Wow, that was fascinating. Very enlightening and very comprehensive. This is exciting, Michael. You've opened up so many ideas to all of us, and sharing and collaborating is really, you know, the key common thread to all of this. And on behalf of IFEES and GEDC and IUCE, I think we offer this platform that we have. This webinar platform is a great way to kind of begin the process of sharing and some of these ideas. And thank you for sharing with us. And I hope many more people will come together with us to do this. While we're waiting for questions from the audience, we just want to do a little quick poll, I think just for fun. And then we'll have a few of our panelists make some comments, and then we can move on from there and discuss from the questions. So let's see if you can vote, guys. Come in and do a little bit. Use your fingers to do this. Based upon this presentation, how can engineering degree programs best prepare for the future of work? Change the content and how degree programs are taught, create stronger partnerships, sabbatical partnership, partner with companies to create certificate programs, all of the above, none of the above. And so we are getting some responses here. We'll just wait for a few more seconds. This is just to limber you up, kind of the warm-up kind of thing while we go through the discussions session in just a couple of minutes. I pulled in a few people into the panelists column, and be prepared to maybe make a few comments when I unmute you all in the panelists column. In the meantime, I see that I'm going to close this poll. I think many of you have voted, and I'm just going to flash that across the screen to say that 80% of you said all of the above. I think 2% of you were kind of maybe in a kind of a humorous mode and said none of the above. And I hope that's what it is. And then the 10% said change the content and how degree programs are taught. And 6% said create stronger partnerships, sabbaticals, and so on, internships. And then 2% said partner with companies to create certificate programs. So I'm going to hide that. And any comments from you, Michael, on what you're seeing the polls saying?
No, it's not too surprising. I think from the GEDC work, when we've been involved, it seemed like these were common themes that have been popping up. So I like that we're all like-minded. And Christian, I think you said something really important, the cooperation and partnership that this forum provides, the webinars, but also just the organizations in general, I think are really important and golden for the future of engineering and the technologies, and impact so many millions and billions of people around the world, have that potential. So so much potential to do more in cooperation together.
Great. I'm going to run down the list of folks that I pulled out here, and I'm going to need to read out their names so they're alert in terms of coming in. I got Ramiro Jordan, who's the president of IFEES, and I got Xavier Fouget from Dassault Systems, and there's no compulsion. If you want to speak, you speak. If you don't want to speak, that's fine. We got Khairia Mahmoud, and then we got from Malaysia, Bill Williams is here, and we got Ashmawi. I'm going to unmute you all in sequence, and if you have a few comments for discussion, just jump in. After that, we'll go to the general audience, which we have about 100 people here. Many of them have some comments. So Ramiro, unmute yourself and jump in.
Yes, thank you, Krishna. Excellent presentation, Michael. It's an eye-opener, especially for nowadays. I think the whole world is going to change. This is a great opportunity to really make the change and start walking our talk. We always said we have to go online, we have to reach out. Well, now it's time to do it. We're forced to go online. And I'm talking with my academic hat. Universities are very, very slow accepting change. So you touched right on the money. And also I like the global perspective, linking industry, universities, non-for-profits, everything in for the future work. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So we're going to go to Xavier. Go ahead. Your comment, response, Michael, and then go to Xavier. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Christian and I were talking right before this about how the virus has forced everyone online and people are needing to learn new skills. And Christian, I liked your comment, which is saying this could change things forever now, just it's a forcing function.
Yep. Xavier, would you like to speak? I think, I know you sent a little note, but if you would like to speak, please unmute yourself and let us hear your wonderful voice, Xavier.
Yeah, I can do shortly.
Yeah,
apologies for interruptions if I'm stopped because the whole country here is working online. The question I had to Michael was we observe signs of weakness, sometimes a decrease in enrollment in aerospace programs in Europe and in some places also in the United States. That is attributed usually to the emergence of a greater effect Same we had in the nuclear industry a few years ago. Lots of interest from kids for that industry that starts to be seen as a dirty one. Do you have in Boeing any initiative that would try to re-energize the pipeline at younger ages than university prior to their enrollment in aerospace programs?
Yes, well, we talk about this at the World Economic Forum quite a bit, that the aerospace industry needs a bit of a marketing campaign. You know, it's as one of the things I mentioned was we were seen as a manufacturing company. Now Boeing and the other aerospace companies are saying, hey, we're an engineering company, so looking to attract engineers. But in my mind, we're also a technology company because we need these data scientists and others who would possibly go to Google or Amazon or Microsoft before Boeing, for example. And so how do we help the young ones, the young people who are aspiring engineers or technologists, see that there's such a great future in aerospace, for example, with autonomous vehicles coming. You know, that's exciting. Rockets to moon and taking humans to Mars. You know, and so going to Mars and beyond is you know usually a lot of people's dreams. And there's a reality. There's a 36-story rocket that's been built to take humans to Mars. And so I think we haven't done a good job of marketing aerospace, especially as we're now competing with technology companies. Your point is a really important one.
Okay, I'm going to move to, thank you, Xavier. I'm going to move to Khairia here. Come in, Khairia. You can unmute yourself, I think. You want to talk, or otherwise we'll go on to Bill Williams. Go ahead. Khairia, are you coming in? Otherwise, I'm going to unmute Bill. Come in. Then if not, you go to Ala. Khairia, come in. Yeah, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Michael, can I ask you about the how are you co-creating the micro degrees or the stackable credentials with universities? What are the initiatives that can you give some examples of the initiatives?
Yeah, I have a colleague, he may be online, Mark Kuzno. I can't see who's online, but within Boeing, we're driving this idea of micro degrees and stackable credentials. And there's been some work done with MIT to say, hey, how do we create a set of certificates that lead to a credential that people can take either on the job or on evenings or weekends? And how do those certificates add up to a stackable credential? So we're starting to architect the combination of certificates leading to a credential, and then stepping back from that and saying, how could we formalize that as a micro degree? And so there's still work needing to be done in, you know, architecting that and moving it forward, particularly, you know, in our difficult times for Boeing right now. But the concept is there, and we're looking to build it out with in partnership with our partner universities, like an MIT for engineering, for example. So it's early days, but we're all seeing this as a future that we need to do. And so, you know, looking at which university partners would work with us on these certificates that become credentials, or these micro degrees where we can give credit to students, you know, or employees going back through these credentials and degrees.
Okay, a couple of other people. Bill, can you jump in, or Ala? I've unmuted both of you. Can you, if you unmute yourself? Bill, come in, yeah, and then after that, Ala.
Yeah.
Okay, Bill, go come in.
Yeah, this is Bill Williams in Portugal. Michael, fascinating presentation, and I was interested. You were talking about value creation, engineering value across the life cycle, and I mean, these are difficult areas of learning for students, for future engineers, and so on. And you mentioned immersing professors and students in companies. So that's, you know, when you can do that successfully, immersing both the professors and the students, that's one way of getting to grips with those, you know, difficult concepts like value creation, value protection, etc. But it's not possible for all students in all parts of the world to be immersed in companies. So one possible alternative that I've seen put is in terms of simulations. In other words, simulating the engineering workplace, problems to do with value creation across the life cycle, things like that. Now, we have very sophisticated simulations for learning in other areas. And I'm wondering, have you come across examples of online simulations of the engineering workplace to help learning and getting to grips with these difficult concepts?
It's an excellent point, and I think simulations are the best way to do it on a massive scale. We had a program called our engineering leadership program, which was based internally on simulation, and so the decisions that you would make as an engineer had impact across the life cycle, and we're creating a new version of that called the technology leadership program. So it's involving engineers plus other technology leaders like IT folks, for example. But I think that's an excellent way for us all to work together to help teach that, not only value across the life cycle, but other difficult concepts like that at broad scale, because engineers can see the part of the work that they've created and then how it flows into this larger engineering process flow, everything from customer requirements to spec validation into design development, production, maintenance, support. That's just our general kind of process flow, and see and track how their work then adds to that process flow as other engineers provide their parts of work. And so the technology allows us, I think, to do these simulations better than ever. I don't think we've focused it enough in this kind of simulated environment for engineers yet. But as you rightly call out, I think the business schools, the B schools, are able to do some of these simulated modeling for startups, and how a startup would create products and services and the impact on a market. And so why not apply the emerging technology to this engineering space to be able to really teach people at broader scale, as you mentioned. I think you bring up an excellent point.
Good point. Let's go to Ala next. Ala, come in. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Very, very interesting presentation. I wanted to follow up on Kyria's question. I've been fascinated by the movement that is going towards micro degrees and stackable credentials. And I was wondering, at what level are we talking about? Because we've been talking to several industry partners here, and most of them are saying, the vast majority are saying that they are still looking to hire people with a 4-year college degree for various reasons. And then they are open to looking at these micro degrees beyond the bachelor's level. But we're seeing companies like Google and Facebook and so on that are saying, we don't care. We don't even need somebody with a high school degree. We just look at skills. To what extent is the discussion at this stage? You said this was an issue that was raised that issue was raised at the World Economic Forum, and I was wondering what is your take on this, and whether Boeing is looking at that specifically. The reason I'm asking is that it's important for universities to understand what kind of stackable credentials the companies are looking for. Are we looking at something beyond the high school level, or something beyond the 4-year college level?
Yeah, and I don't know if Mark Kuzno's on the line, but he could jump in if he is. What I would say at the World Economic Forum, so we've talked about this. We think that 4-year degrees still provide a really strong foundation, and that just as you mentioned, the micro degrees then are a way to continuously learn beyond that. And then the totality of what's been learned becomes the stackable credentials that go onto your profile. From a Microsoft perspective, the vision would be an internal profile, a LinkedIn profile within a company that shows the badges and credentials you've earned, that could then also feed out to an external profile on LinkedIn globally. That's the Microsoft vision of all this. But so far, to the heart and soul of your question at the World Economic Forum, people still feel that four-year degrees provide a great foundation. Over time, they wonder if micro degrees and stackable credentials would become as important or more important than four-year degrees. There hasn't been, I don't think, any kind of conversion yet to saying that that's going to happen or should happen from the discussions we've had there. Within Boeing, we've talked about, do we always require in a job description a four-year degree? And so far, we have for a lot of roles, a lot of professional roles in particular, but have talked about would there be a time where we wouldn't require four-year degrees? And the conversations come up, but no changes yet. We still think that the degree provides a foundation.
Okay, thank you, Ala. I'm going to go to two other people if they would like to talk. Otherwise, so Shoma, I'm going to unmute you. Can you, if you would like to talk, and then we go to Rajiv Lal. After that, Shoma, would you like to talk, or can I move on to talk? You had a comment.
Sure.
Go ahead, Shoma, yeah.
Sure. You can hear me, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael, thanks so much. I have done continuing engineering education for a long time, and you were supposed to speak as a keynote speaker at our World Conference and International Association for Continuing Engineering Education. Yeah, so we're very sorry we wouldn't be able to meet you in person in May, but hopefully later. No specific question, but if you can focus a little bit about the really advanced skill level. I mean, I have worked with Boeing from the university side before. Now I work for ANSYS. I mean, what we have seen you in Boeing or any other aerospace companies provide support to the advanced level engineers in developing the higher level skill set. That's a niche group of people and not very many, but how can the university support them?
Yes, it's a great question. And first, thanks for mentioning the conference in Norway. I hope it gets reset, and I'd love to still be involved to support that. So to your question, so we have technical fellows, and they need development. They often do a lot of self-education. So we find that and this was the same way at Microsoft, by the way, our CTOs and our fellows were very self-educated in being sponges and absorbing what they can, and they had their sources. But they also said, hey, we need some more formal approaches or semi-structured approaches to our learning so that we're more consistently learning together the things that the business needs. Otherwise, it's all individualized and them learning what they think they need. We at Boeing have a group of technical fellows that have been more self-taught and have learned on their own for a number of years, but we're launching a new program around technical fellows this year to increase the pipeline of people becoming fellows and then help keep the fellows fresh on skills. And it's a lot of the skills that we talk about on that last slide I had. They often are a neglected group because they're smart, they're advanced, they're coaching and mentoring others, and we're looking to get them to coach and mentor others even more. The Pluralsight company that I mentioned is one of the best at keeping those advanced people up to date at that, say, 300 or 400 level, kind of that guru master level, and that's why at Microsoft, we had a really strong partnership with Pluralsight. They bring in a lot of the best gurus to develop online courses, and then all the other gurus can take the courses through Pluralsight. And so that model seems to be working, and that's one of the best ways we can keep our advanced people fresh. But universities play an important role in that too, because a lot of the cutting edge research comes out of the university. So the more that universities can be involved, like Pluralsight, in keeping these advanced people up to date, the better. And I think that area is a blank canvas that should be explored more.
Thank you, Soma, and thank you, Michael. On to Rajiv Lal. Come in, Rajiv.
Yeah, Michael, this is Rajiv here. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can all hear you.
Hi, Rajiv.
So, Michael, a very good presentation, and you've clearly brought out the way we should look at these issues from the industry standpoint, from the country standpoint, and the global standpoint, and how they can be synergy developed all across, so that there isn't too much of a duplication. A very interesting session. One of the experiences I have had is that in many organizations, the HR is very much aware of the shortage of 4 IR skills that will come up. But they find that their own employees who might even be in some kind of dead-end jobs, do not take enough interest in reskilling themselves. Have you got similar feedback, and what do you think should be the solution to this?
Yeah, the HR component I think is really important to this, because a lot of people, go into HR not because maybe they're not so technologically advanced, and so what we found within our own HR community is that they tend to focus on the human skills a lot, but aren't quite sure how to address the technology skills. So we have an initiative where we're saying, hey, in HR, you've got to gain business acumen. You've got to gain some ability to help all the other employees in the company understand these new technologies and how they can go about gaining those skills. And then, so business acumen, technology acumen, and also program project management to be able to drive initiatives at broad scale across the enterprise that really help employees gain these skills. So we have some work to do, I think, within the HR ranks to bolster those folks in understanding how to deal with this technology revolution. And I do think there are some real gaps in the HR billability.
Okay.
Good, thanks.
Thank you, Rajiv. Rajiv also had another quick question. I'm going to read it out for you. And this is something that everybody will be struggling with at the universities is we have conventional departments, mechanical, electrical, chemical, etc. And obviously what you pointed out is all of those students also need to have some of these skills in artificial intelligence and so on. How have you seen examples of universities that are making the transition to actually give some of these other basic skills for Industry 4.0 to other disciplines?
From my perspective, I haven't seen a lot of that. I mean, I would say Stanford's doing some of that work, and I'd say some universities are starting to do some work that is that transition. I think that's another place where there should be a huge thrust of energy and effort, because I'd say maybe the business schools are one that are starting to gain that, mainly because within business schools, people are thinking about startups in the new technology areas. So probably the greatest synergy is B schools or biotech. I think the biotech area is a place where they're really interested in staying up on these skills and how the new technologies can move medicine forward and global health.
Okay, interesting question from Samida Kurle. What are the skills the professors must have in for Education 4.0 to educate students for Industry 4.0?
That's a great broad question for sure. I do think the business acumen and the industry acumen is important in at least having an overview of where business and industry are headed. And then, the more product strategy piece in being able to use case studies of products and services from different industries on how engineering plays out, not just from a technical engineering standpoint, but also from a market standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a full featured standpoint of a product or service, so that bigger picture continues to be taught in how engineering and the use of the new technologies are playing into that context.
Okay, I wanted to comment on something, and one of Professors Keshav Nandurkar also has asked this question about women engineers and how to developing IR skills. And you mentioned an interesting example of the work being done in Afghanistan. Is there some way that we can replicate some of that exciting work that you're doing with women in Afghanistan, or maybe do it in India or something like that?
Definitely. We're looking for partners and sponsors in this space. We just had a meeting with Stanford. I brought Stanford into this mix from teaching there, and the UN and Stanford are forming a partnership here. Country of Sweden, I mentioned, is sponsoring this first pilot. It's brand new, so we'll have a lot more data after these first 3 months, but we're looking to expand definitely in post-conflict countries, as I mentioned, Afghanistan, Iraq, the post-conflict countries of Africa. India would be a possibility. It's just really about sponsorship and funding, but we think we're onto a model that could really scale.
Okay.
So if anyone's interested,
one more question from this is Engineers Without Borders in India. Sanjay Gadale, go ahead, unmute yourself if you can. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Hi, Michael. A wonderful presentation. I was just tracing through your last slide, there was actually a good talk that we had with Portland's Institute around a month back, with Krishna Vidula also on board. They are looking at, in fact, we are looking at some sort of a tie-up which allows us to government and government to higher education impact programs, which actually is able to bring in technology and internet related learning content and components at the community level. Anything in that area that we could actually look at working in?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think that's another area that has so much potential. I'm willing to follow up offline on any of these conversations, women in India, or
we'll follow up offline,
this last point, because
great.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential.
Fantastic. I think we run out of time, and I don't want to keep anybody beyond the time. I think it's been exciting. Lots of good questions, and there were many more questions also. Couldn't find time to get to that. We might just share them with the speaker later on. I want to end on the note that we are in challenging times today all over the world, and as Ramiro and others have pointed out, we have all our universities are now online, at least for the next several months. We're learning new tricks and new skills ourselves as faculty members to do these things online. And this might be the right time actually to continue to have these kinds of discussions online. So thank you so much for being an important part of this discussion. And anybody else in this audience that would like to come up and present webinars on how to deal with some of these challenges, and particularly helping faculty teach online and helping and then integrating some of these latest skills that Michael is talking about. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And Michael, and thank you for the audience. We have almost 100 people, and most of them are still here. And with that, I say good night, good morning, good evening to all of you. And any last words from you, Michael?
Just to say thank you for everything you do. I have such great respect for all your work, and you're helping to shape and change the world. So let's do it together. I'll be a resource for you going forward.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.